morning. Welcome to our service. Whether you are with us here on Zoom or here in person, we are glad you're here. I'm Celia Buckley, serving as a worship associate today. Reverend Roger's sermon today is entitled Death, Loss, and Other Disappointments, Grief, and Vulnerability. Reverend Lucy will be back next Sunday for our annual question box service. She invites you to submit your questions to her about religion, spiritual practice, UUism, or any other topic that is on your mind or on your heart. Send them to Lucy by email or call her up. You can submit your question in person before the service begins, although you have a better chance if you email. If you'd like to follow the music and readings in today's printed copy of the order of, there is a printed copy of the order of service on our back table by the doors, or online you can click in the Zoom chat link. The Blue Sheet Weekly Calendar Activities is also on the back table and also online with a link in the chat. We invite you to explore the ways we live out our mission, which says, we come together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world. Our summer bi-weekly message comes out by email every other Friday. You can also find it on our website and subscribe to it there. It has news and announcements of events, invitations to volunteer activities, and a note from one of the ministers. We're happy to tell you about a special concert next Sunday afternoon offered by Irina, Tchantceva, and friends, and A Hint of Blue, wonderful music with flute, violin, cello, string bass, piano, and voice. Two of the pieces you will hear today are part of today's program, but you have to show up to hear the rest. You can buy tickets at the door for $20 by cash, check, or text. Also, our talented music director, Anthony Tavianini, wherever he is, also leads our choir, and our choir is resuming rehearsal starting Wednesday, August 24th at 7 p.m. over in the Foz room, and all are welcome to come and join and make a joyous noise and music together, whether you've ever been part of the choir or not. So it starts Wednesday the 24th. And if you're new here to UUSS, we extend you a special welcome. There is a newcomer's card you can fill out so we can connect with you, and you can find that either on the link in the chat or out in the welcome hall at the welcome table after the service. And after the service on Zoom, we have 12 minutes of conversation and getting together in smaller breakout rooms. Just stay on Zoom and you'll be put into a room. Here on site, please check out the connections table in the welcome hall, and there are refreshments outside on the patio. And this is the second Sunday of the month, and on the second Sunday, we have an orientation with a tour of the campus. Anyone is welcome, whether you're new or have been coming a while, so grab your beverage and come back into the welcome hall to find Reverend Roger, who is today's tour guide. He'll meet you at the tall, higher table in the welcome hall. Again, we are glad you're here. Please check your cell phone so that you're not embarrassed and your neighbor is not annoyed. And most important, that we can help everyone to be more present and mindful in the service. And now let us pause to receive the century music. Thank you.
Thank you. I will be out of town next Sunday afternoon, so I'll miss the concert, so I'm really happy to hear some of the music this morning and to know what many of you will get to hear next Sunday at 2. Happy to see all of you, happy to be with all of you. Our chalice lighting words are a responsive reading. I will begin, and please respond with Celia reading the words in bold. We kindle this flame
of our shared search for understanding.
In times of celebration,
may its brightness reflect our gratitude.
in times of heartbreak,
let its warmth renew our connections and bring us healing.
in times of urgency or confusion,
may its fire bring us courage and commitment.
in times of loss or change,
let its light illuminate the ways forward into life.
in all times,
let us remind us of our mission. We come together
to deepen our lives
and be a force for healing in the world. If you have a joy or sorrow, some kind of news or a hope or prayer, you may let the ministers know any week by using the online link, which you can find in the bi-weekly email message, or you can call the office by Friday to let us know of your news. A few things on some of our hearts. The flowers you see today are given in memory of Rowena Spencer Pizanowski, the mother of Allison Buckman. And today I will officiate at Rowena's memorial service at 2 p.m. over in the Faz room. Salman Rushdie's readers here and many other people around the world feel sorrow and outrage over the brutal knife attack on the acclaimed author on Friday as he began to give a lecture at the Chalkwa Institute in New York State. We send loving wishes for healing from his injuries, and we send prayers of peace to the community there who have been witness to such a sad and brutal crime. We give our good wishes and prayers for travel, for all those who are traveling, and for those who are preparing for a new school year. Now let us pause together as a community. May we settle in to an awareness of our bodies, where we are sitting or resting. And let us now become aware of our breathing individually, our breathing together, our common breath. So now let us take a deep inhale breath and hold it in for a moment and then exhale deeply. And now a second time, inhale and pause, and then deeply exhale. And now on this third and final time, I invite you to exhale out by making sound. Exhale out with a sigh full of our spirit, first breathing in deeply and pausing. And now as we continue breathing wherever we are, let us join in the spirit of prayer as I offer these words. O Spirit of life, on this morning we remember to give thanks for the gift of life and for the blessing of this new day. O Spirit of love, bless our lives, bless all who are in our circles of care and concern, and bless our world with peace. As we strive to confront injustice and promote human dignity, give us courage. Strengthen us in community and in solidarity so that we might give new life and new strength to our shared values. For all the struggles and the uncertainties of our days, help us to move through the moments of life with strength and with grace. Help us to practice patience with ourselves and with one another. Let us be open to all opportunities to bring peace and hope into our lives and into our world. For all our occasions of joy and for all sources of beauty around us, let us give thanks. Help us to notice the ordinary miracles of life. Let us be grateful. So may it be. Blessed be, and amen. And now we'll take a moment of silence for our personal reflections and meditations. Blessed be, and peace.
In a moment, I'll be inviting everyone to sing a Buddhist chant with me. I'll introduce the text first and then have Irina play the melody so that we can apply what we're hearing lyrically to the music. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. We'll sing this 4 times, starting inward and then moving outwards as we say, may I be filled. When we sing it the second time, we'll extend it outwards. May you be filled. May we be filled. May all be filled. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. May all be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be peaceful and at ease. May all be whole.
I met Betsy in 1983. We were both hired that year at UC Davis as the first pediatric advanced practice nurse in our respective fields. She became the best friend I've ever had at her work. Unfortunately, Betsy had to leave a few years later due to medical issues, but we continued to meet for coffee or lunch 2 to 3 times a year after she left. Last July, I was surprised by a phone call from her husband, Peter. Peter informed me Betsy was hospitalized and wanted to see me before she talked to hospice. Astounded, but with no other information, I dropped everything and immediately went to the hospital. At Betsy's bedside, I learned she had woken up after a routine surgery with a neurological complication. She was now completely paralyzed on one side. A recent brain biopsy confirmed she had an aggressive brain tumor. When I arrived, she said she wanted to ask me if I remembered what I had promised her over 20 years before. I had no memory. But apparently, she had secured my promise that if ever needed, I would sing Schubert's Ave Maria at her funeral. I was in shock, completely flabbergasted, unprepared. My answer was, of course I will sing. And I would do anything for you. Peter took me aside and asked if I had any recommendations for funeral arrangements. I told him about our 2 ministers here at the UU Society of Sacramento and gave him the name of a locally owned funeral home my family used for my mother. I then informed them both I was heading to the Southwest for a 2-month RV trip on August 25th and would not return until late October. Peter said they didn't know how much time she had, but if she died before I got home, they might delay her funeral until I returned. Betsy was discharged home on August 16th, and she died on October 5th. Peter and I exchanged a few texts and tear-filled phone calls. He was grateful for the funeral home I had recommended and would plan her service around my return date. On October 8th, Peter called me to be sure that Betsy's birthday, October 27th, would work for me to be at her service. When I asked him who he had arranged to officiate at her celebration of life, I was speechless when he replied, "I thought you said you would do it." Being devastated by the horrific diagnosis of a brain tumor in my dear friend paled in comparison to my response that Peter was planning I would be conducting her service. But this man was an emotional wreck, and I was unable to tell him we had never discussed that. Panicked, I reached out to our 2 UU ministers for guidance and resources. The very next day, Reverend Rogers sent me a full script for a celebration of life service and suggestions. I arrived home on October 23rd, and I both sang Ave Maria and officiated at her celebration of life on October 27th. Although truly gobsmacked when I learned that Peter and Betsy expected I would actually officiate at her celebration of life instead of just singing, I now realize it was a gift. It gave me the opportunity to say yes to love. Isn't that what our Unitarian Universalist principles teach us? Yes to love. For my love for Betsy, yes to honor her final wishes, saying yes to this unexpected request turned out to help me mourn the loss of my dear friend, and for that I am deeply grateful.
from the poem For the Anniversary of My Death by W.S. Merwin, published in 1993. Every year, without knowing it, I have passed the day when the last fires will wave to me, and the silence will set out, tireless traveler, like the beam of a lightless star. Then I will no longer find myself in life as in a strange garment, surprised at the earth and the love of one woman, and the shamelessness of men. As today, riding after 3 days of rain, hearing the wrens sing and the falling cease, and bowing, not knowing to what.
Generosity is a spiritual practice, and our congregation practices generosity by giving away half of each Sunday's offering to an organization that is working to make a difference in the world. For August, our community partner is the International Rescue Committee that has a local office in our Arden Arcade neighborhood. IRC provides support for refugees, asylees, victims of human trafficking, survivors of torture, and other immigrants to live here in America. The IRC works with government bodies, civil society actors, and local volunteers to help people translate their past experiences into assets that are valuable to their new communities. And these services help them to rebuild their lives. Please give generously in support of this organization. You can see on the slide the ways that you can donate. It's also posted in the chat as well. Thank you for your generosity. This morning's offering will now be given and received.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Irina. Thank you for the concert next week. As Marion and Margot bring our offerings forward, please join with me in reading the words of response. May the spirit of gratitude bless and multiply all that we have, all that we give, and all that we receive. Loss and grief are primary human experiences, inevitable ones for everyone. Yet in spite of how familiar such experiences may be for us, we seem to resist going through them. Loss and grief are something we all share, yet we are not always present or patient with one another as we grieve. This is because grief makes us vulnerable. Grief and loss teach us that we have a lot less control than we like to think. David Richo is a Buddhist writer and a marriage and family therapist. In his book, 5 True Things, he writes that we suffer so much because we try to control our lives rather than seeing our lives clearly. Quote, "Control is one of our favorite ways of running away from life as it is. Control is an illusion so deeply ingrained that we think we can let go of control simply by wanting to. We do not let go of control," he says. We let go of the belief that we have control. Loss of any kind is not only disappointing, sad, or painful. It exposes our vulnerability, exposes our lack of control over life. My mother died when I was 30 after a long decline from emphysema. Though her passing wasn't a shock, it was a big loss. Where she had been present in my life, I felt an absence. 2 years after her death, I was back home visiting central Indiana, and on a Sunday, I visited All Souls Unitarian Church in Indianapolis. I was not yet a minister at that time. Larry McGinty was their interim minister. I don't remember the sermon that I heard, yet in their library at coffee hour, I found an article that he had written for a UU publication. It was about grief. And in that article, he captured some of what I had gone through in the year or two since my mother's death. He wrote that in grieving, memories can pop up at odd moments, not merely at specific dates on the calendar or when visiting a familiar place. Sadness can intrude on our lives when it seems quite unwelcome. Moreover, he wrote, in the months following a loss, we who grieve can become absent-minded, even accident-prone. Tasks that we usually handle with ease become stressful. We sometimes react with words or actions we might later regret. We can be impulsive. Larry wrote that if you are in the wake of a loss, you might feel an urge to make an abrupt change, like moving to a new state, getting a divorce, or changing careers. His advice, please give yourself a year to wait, and then come back to that idea and see if it still appeals to you. It was a great relief to see so much of my experience validated as typical, as natural. A few years later, when I read of Larry's death, I said a prayer of thanks to him for helping me in that brief article. That was 30 years ago. Last month, I lost one of my oldest friends. In 1988, Charlie Cast was the minister of the Second Unitarian Church when I moved to Chicago. As a young adult, my participation in that congregation and Charlie's ministry in particular were foundational experiences for me. In addition to gaining a joyful sense of community, In those years, I began to gain a sense of direction and purpose in my life. Though we differed in personality and in style, the ways that he served as a minister and lived as a spiritual person shaped who I became. It shaped many other people too. For example, Charlie showed us how to explore our own attitudes about money, its role in our lives, and how we use it with regard to our values. Charlie was frugal, but he was deeply generous. He was frank about his own monetary commitments to the church. I learned more about stewardship in that congregation than I learned in seminary. Another example, he loved kids and youth, and he cared about the plight of children in this country. He became a foster parent in Chicago. Over 9 years, more than 100 kids came through his apartment. Many of them showed up at our church, where they were welcomed and included. Charlie's joy in mentoring and his passion for justice would provoke my later involvement as a volunteer advocate for kids and youth, as well as my life as a minister to them. Charlie had a stroke last April, and he didn't get better. In July, when I was in North Carolina, I visited his nursing home near Chapel Hill, where he had served his last ministry and retired. I told him what I appreciated about him. We reminisced about our days in Chicago. I updated him on my life here. Though it was not easy for him to talk, and sometimes he had some confusion, he made sure that I knew about the record of the Sacramento Kings basketball team near the bottom. Charlie told me that he had requested hospice care and was preparing to die. "I will die happy," he said. "Why is that?" I asked him. He said, 10 years ago, I realized that I had achieved my life's purpose, and I would be ready for death." I asked him what that purpose was. He said, "To be the fullest expression of Charlie as possible, the fullest expression of who I am as possible, given genetics and environment and other conditions, and to make the world a better place." His words resonated with all the sermons that I'd ever heard him give. After a long visit, I said, "I love you." He asked for a hug. We said goodbye. He died 10 days later at age 81. At every stage of his life, his outlook and his practice gave him an ability to let go of expectations, to accept the reality of loss, grieve disappointments, and move into life again. And now he was letting go one more time. After I came home from North Carolina, I felt sad, but I didn't think the grief was deep or heavy. In spite of all that I had learned, I had the illusion that grieving this loss would be straightforward, not surprising. But a few weeks later, I began waking up anxious and extra early every morning. My to-do list has always been long, but this time I would feel a jolt when I would think of one more thing that I would have to add to it, or think of something that I forgot to do. Also, the absent-mindedness thing. It is normal for me to be absent-minded, but last Thursday morning takes the cake. I drove here to church, I got out of the car, and I carried my lunch bag into my office. However, I couldn't find my backpack. It holds my computer as well as my notebook, so it's hard to work without it. Not in the trunk, not in the seats of the car. As I drove back home, I moaned about the time and the gasoline that I was wasting. Ugh, I pulled up at the curb next to my house. The sunlight shined inside the car, landing on the passenger side. It illuminated the gray and black backpack on the floor. It had been there the whole time. This is when I realized that perhaps the abnormal feelings of these days are part of the normal process of my grieving. Just because the journey of grieving becomes familiar doesn't mean it gets easier. One of the most unhelpful sentences to say to a grieving person is, "Isn't it time for you to get over this?" Sometimes we say this to ourselves. According to therapist and writer Leanne Campbell, we don't get over it. We move through it. We respect our grieving. We feel it. We can move through challenging emotions with courage and compassion and patience and help. She writes that in the early stages of grieving, it's a process of alternating feelings of protest and despair. It's a natural process, but not a pleasant one. We need to respect our grieving, not hide it. If we have difficulty in resuming normal activities or in finding any joy or any purpose for an extended period of time, we may need to ask for professional help. But whether we need that or not, we all need companions in grieving. We need to be open to one another's odd but natural experiences, whether in ordinary one-to-one conversations or in a group setting. This congregation hosted a grief support group a few years ago. It was facilitated by a chaplain from a local hospice agency. And now we are planning to offer our own grief support group at UUSS, and it's planned to take place over several weeks in the spring. And it will be publicized, of course, in the email message and blue sheet. There are so many losses that we may grieve: the death of people close to us or the ending of a relationship. People grieve the loss of a pet and the loss of a home, whether from eviction or financial devastation or from a natural disaster. I have a friend in his 90s who has moved into a lovely continuing care facility in his town. He likes it, but he's grieving the sale of his home and most of his possessions. A few years ago, he gave up his car. He grieved that as well. His grief is real, but so is his practice to accept life as it is, to keep an open heart, and to give thanks for every day. As human beings get older, most of us lose energy, physical ability, and good health. Things can go wrong, and they will. Some people face a loss or decline in function earlier, but it is part of the aging process. Ever since I was young, people said that I had an old soul. What I say now is, I have an old soul, and now my body is catching up with it. Grief is not optional. It is natural. Problems arise when we suppress our feelings of grief, deny it, or fail to notice it. Grieving is what happens to us. Mourning is different. Mourning is the way that we choose to recognize, ritualize, or otherwise honor the loss and the grief. David Richo has written that grieving and mourning are the work we do to accept the reality of a loss. Tears are the body's way of saying, yes, this happened. Memories and storytelling are the soul's way of saying yes to what we had and what we lost, saying yes to learning to live with a sense of absence. I talked about my loss of Charlie to a counselor who is my spiritual director. She asked me if I could identify an image or a feeling. Well, I'm embarrassed to be using a cliche, I said, but it feels as if one of my limbs is missing. She asked if I might think of ways to ritualize this loss and this relationship that has changed. I said, well, I can try to pay attention to the times when I'm doing things that reflect what I learned from Charlie. I could honor him through my actions. Yes. She added that having a tangible way to mark the loss and honor the relationship could also be helpful. For example, she said, some people create altars in their home for a time. I never do stuff like that, I said. However, on my last visit with Charlie, he said he wanted his friends to go over to his apartment and take whatever we wanted of his things. Take what you want. So I did that. I took a few snapshots from his earlier life. I took his coffee mug of the Chicago Cubs baseball team and some art. And I took home this, a beaten-up binder which held his sermons. Now it holds mine. I still have birthday cards and Christmas letters that he had sent me, and a church directory from our Chicago days. I do plan to build an altar on a table at my house. Whether it's up for only a few days or a few weeks, when I look at it, I will have a place and a moment where I can remember him and say a prayer of gratitude. Another thing that I don't do is write letters to people who've passed away, but I have begun writing to him. This past week, I took 2 sessions of 1 hour each to write my memories, my appreciation. It can be tempting to minimize a loss and to think we shouldn't be having the emotions we do. It's easy to note that other people around the world are living and dying and losing people in much more desperate situations. Yet that reality does not negate or diminish our experience of loss and grief. It is a natural part of life. David Richo says, everything falls apart in time. Just as we all grieve the loss of others, we can feel sad or scared when we recognize our own mortality. It's okay to grieve that fact, whether we are approaching the end of life or hoping we have a lot more years. Honest grief honors the gift of life. Honest grief bows to life. In his poem for the anniversary of my death, W.S. Merwin writes, every year, without knowing it, I have passed the day when the last fires will wave to me and the silence will set out. The poet reflects on this reality. He doesn't know when it will be. He's uncertain about what comes later. As long as he's alive, however, he commits to noticing the ordinary features of life. He continues bowing, not knowing to what. The work of grieving is the practice of noticing what is real for us. Feelings, emotions, images, impulses. We notice our lack of control and honor our vulnerability. The role of serving as companions in mourning calls us to a practice of respecting one another's ways of grieving. We respect the real emotions. Both our own grieving and our own solidarity with others call for the practice of keeping an open heart. This, I think, is the key to living deeply at any time, not just in times of loss and grief and mourning. Keeping an open heart. Death is mysterious and powerful. So is life. Life is a miracle and a blessing. Let us bow to life. Let us keep an open heart. Let us notice each day that we are given to live. Let us bow to it in honor and in thanks. So may it be. Blessed be. And amen.
As we process our own grieving, let us recognize that, as Roger said, we can bow to life in noting that life calls us on. Please stand and sing with us.
Here in reverence we have gathered for the blessings we have known, with a pledge to one another that we journey not alone. Joy and sorrow makes us wise, kin to all that lives and dies. Love calls us on. Love calls us on. Words and deeds of those before us waken here to keep us strong. Blend our voices in the chorus of creation's living song. Courage bids us lift our eyes upward to the shining skies. Love calls us on. Love calls us on. Loyal guides in love and duty lead us with a trusted light. Blessed are they whose inward beauty shows the path of truth and right. Honor is their earthly prize. By their work we realize faith calls us on. Faith calls us on. We have shared a radiant hour when the truth has made us free, and the Spirit's gracious power dreamed of good that yet shall be. Bear the path before us lies. Joyful pilgrims now we rise. Life calls us on. 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 Life calls us on.
Now we extinguish our chalice flame, but we carry its warmth and love with us. invite you to reach out to one another. If you're at home, reach out to us. We reach out to you. May you depart in peace and return in joy. May you bow to life and notice all the blessings that are there for you. May you reach out when you need to. May you reach out. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. And for all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it, step by step, breath by breath, one day at a time. Blessed be. Amen.
And Zoomers, don't go